Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so I'm going to sit down so these guys can hear me. I think quite a few of you know who I am. It's actually, I think, my fourth time here. I've been here twice to talk about rock climbing trips, and I've been here twice to talk about flying trips. And I was just thinking about, the reason why I've had so many expeditions, so many adventures to talk about, obviously because I'm so bloody old nowadays, But one of the benefits of being old, of course, is that you do end up having more means and money to throw at the various expeditions that you want to do. So the nature of them changes a little bit, I think. I mean, the best explorations, I think, no question about it, are the explorations of youth with very limited kind of means, where you just get up and kind of get on with it, And I still am sad, not ready to engage so much in those things anymore. But you can get a little bit of what those have to offer later in your life with a bit more means, in these slightly more kind of elaborate trips that we're able to do as a consequence of being a little bit further along the line. So the journey, the planned journey that I'm going to speak a little bit about tonight, in principle, is an aeroplane flight that I'm going to do leaving on the 10th of July from Johannesburg to Oshkosh, Wisconsin in the United States, in a little aeroplane with a 1300cc engine, actually as part of a group together with two other little aeroplanes. But obviously, an adventure like that doesn't just happen. You don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to get in a little plane, the same size engine as my Toyota Corolla, and I'm going to fly to America. There's a process which kind of leads to that point. And since everyone's been kind of stuck in their homes for a couple of years, I'm going to talk a little bit about the path first that has taken me to the point where we're going to do this adventure. It might be a bit of a revision for some of you. And then I'm going to talk, and I hope take some questions on this kind of trip itself. So in my previous life, I was a lawyer in Johannesburg, and I did love adventure, flew aeroplanes a bit. I had a kind of a lucky break, and I was looking for something new to do in my life. And a mate of mine was trying to develop a little two-seater aeroplane because of changing regulations. His name was Mike Blythe. He'd been at it for a couple of years, and he was a little bit running out of money and enthusiasm, and he needed some kind of youth and energy. And I had just had this lucky break, so I joined him in, I think, end of 2007. And between the beginning of 2008 and October 2008, we developed, with the help of 3 other employees, a prototype of a little two-seater aeroplane. We called ourselves the Airplane Factory at that time, and we built this aeroplane in a little industrial park in Edenvale, Sunny Rock Park. And this is the aeroplane that came out of that little industrial park, I think section 41, Sunny Rock Park. We flew that little aeroplane. I was going to talk with notes, by the way. I'm going to give up my notes, make it up as I go along. A couple of whiskeys should help me do this. I know we're not supposed to have questions. Is there anything you desperately need to know? You can always ask at the end, but jump in if you want. We flew this little aeroplane for 42 hours, and we made a bunch of changes and modifications, got a lot of advice. We'd had 3 different vertical stabilizers, changed the hinge points on the ailerons twice, and after 42 hours, we realized this plane's just not safe to fly anymore. So we flew one beautiful evening flight around Johannesburg, on which this photograph was taken. This photograph was actually taken by Marianne Schwankart over here, out of a Robinson helicopter. Most gorgeous evening. And this is just a very Johannesburg photograph, my favorite one. And on this flight, Mike and I realized that the airplane was handling so beautifully that We had to have an expedition in it to show it to the world. And the best place and occasion to show a new aeroplane to the world is at the world's greatest air show. It's called EAA AirVenture, and it takes place in Oshkosh in Wisconsin in the USA. And we had the discussion about building from this development prototype airplane a production prototype airplane to show at that air show. I noticed sometime afterwards, when you zoom in on this shot in front of the old Anglo Gold building here with the Johnny Walker advert. Oh, it's the Southern Life building, sorry. I can see I'm going to get corrected by Marianne here throughout. She very seldom has the opportunity. But the words hope and reality were underneath the aeroplane over here. And it kind of feels like the beginning of a business, which in itself has been quite an exploration. I think it might emerge a little bit as I kind of talk you through some of these slides. So we chucked that aeroplane away. We did a lot of planning. And then in 6 weeks, we built a replacement aeroplane. This two-seater over here. And we took off on the 12th of July after it had just flown a total, I think, of 12 hours to fly it over some of the longest stretches of water on Earth to take it to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and then return around the world. Another great kind of adventure in our life started as a result, or certainly in my life, started as a result of this trip because we filmed some of it. And when we got back, I went to watch the opening night of a movie that a mate of mine known as Lloyd Ross was showing. It was a film called The Silver Fairs. And Lloyd tells an absolutely wonderful story. I asked him to help us make a movie of this trip around the world. I'm going to show you because it captures some of the start of our explorations in our aeroplanes, a little short of a wonderful film that Lloyd Ross made of this trip of ours around the world. So Lloyd happens to be here tonight. That's him over there. I'm sure quite a lot of you will be familiar with some of the music that he has made in South Africa. His origin is a music production business called Shifty Records. And he created some wonderful music which gave black artists initially the opportunity to record and publish their music in South Africa. Later, the kind of Afrikaner alternative music movement, Johannes Kerkorrel, Koos Kombuis, Andre de Tooy, I think Valiant Swart, not so much Valiant. But the Voelvrye tour, was that the first film you made? Voelvrye. No. Anyway, he got into film afterwards, realized that music's a tough business. So we are going to struggle a little bit with our screens over here. I'm going to have to reconnect screen sharing, I think, as we look at this. I'm going to go like this. Hello, can I find a flat pen, please? And I'm going to, shit. Okay. If I go like this. Hello, can I find a flat pen, please? The civil aviation operator will be horrified in this shit. So I'm going to try and get these guys on Zoom so that they can see this as well. Shit. Does anybody know how to find on Zoom? Oh no, but I need to do it. Oh, maybe it's at the bottom. Oh no, but I don't think. Okay, let me try. If I go share screen, oh, that's the screen I want to share. Okay. Okay. Aircraft identification is Zulu uniform, Tango Alpha Foxtrot. That when we took off for the first long leg, The aeroplane had in fact never had full fuel tanks. It's called a sling. We had never taken off at what's called maximum all-up weight. It's a light sport aircraft. So we didn't actually know for sure whether she would take off at all to Sao Tome. It's literally one continuous flight. But basically, we're not landing anywhere. If you have a look at the internet on airplanefactory.co.za, you'll see that we are the designers of an aircraft which we're busy flying around the world. We're flying to Oshkosh, and this is our first leg. We'd also never flown at night, at all. Yes, that's right. It's a very long leg. So we climbed into the airplane for the first time, fully loaded, for a night flight. We took off just as the sun set to fly to Sao Tome, which was the longest straight line flight ever in an aeroplane as small as ours.
There was a lot of tension in the beginning.
Okay.
So you need to allow sound.
Okay, yeah, that's up here. Share sounds on.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I've heard it.
Because we were climbing out, we were heading towards hills, we were about to cross the border, the sun was going down, both of us were monitoring the navigation and talking on the radio, and we were both working, you know. In those moments, you don't have time to talk or think about things because you've got a serious job to do. But as the sun started setting, suddenly this moment sort of came over us that we realized we're on our way.
Mike turned to me and he just shouted, "Ah!" We were sitting there like two kind of school kids, just like hugging each other. There was this incredible release with being airborne, being on the trip, and being away. It was now just up to us and the aeroplane. And then it took about 10 minutes before we hit the first crisis. So, okay, I need to start sharing my screen again. Quickly.
Sounded like a question. How did you find me?
Make a lot of noise. Hey, open it.
Oh, shit, how do I get hold of the share of this? I know, but it's not going to. I mean, that one I can share. Oh, here we go.
Fuck, I'm lucky that thing's not technology driven.
Yeah, there we go. Share. Okay. We're going to have to do this one more time. So that was an absolutely incredible journey that we did. And it kind of, the concept of that trip captures some of what we have planned for July this year ahead of us. We came back, aeroplane performed so well, even at massively overweight weights. That aeroplane was supposed to have a maximum all-up weight of 600 kilograms. When we took off to fly from West Africa, Conakry to Belém in Brazil, and again when we took off to fly from California, from Los Angeles to Hawaii, flights which took us 22 and a half hours each. The aeroplane weighed 920 kilograms. So more than 50% overweight. The fuel in the aeroplane weighed more than the aeroplane itself. So we realized that with a turbocharged engine slightly bigger wingspan, we could turn this 2-seater aeroplane into a 4-seater aeroplane. And the very next year, we started building a 4-seater version of exactly the same aeroplane. This is the first time we ever had it built enough for 4 of us to fit in it to kind of test the sizing. By this stage, we were delivering 2-seater aeroplanes out of our business here in the south of Joburg. And so we had a much greater capacity. We're no longer just like 5 people working in our garage. If you look at this photograph carefully, we wanted to take our prototype 4-seater to Oshkosh again to show it to the world, to try and sell it to people and fly it again around the world. We never actually ultimately managed it because we missed the Oshkosh show because the Civil Aviation Authority wouldn't give us the necessary piece of paper. But we built it under very tight time constraints to try and achieve that. And there are 13 different people in this photograph, some of them in the back of the aeroplane there, trying to get this airplane ready in time. This is what it looked like the day before we took off and flew it the other way around the world. This time, ordinarily into the headwinds, if you're in the tropics, but we flew at high latitudes. And so as a consequence, the wind reverses. We flew towards the west on this occasion instead of towards the east. Towards the west the second time around. From east to west. Joburg to Reunion to Sri Lanka. Sorry, east. Sorry, towards the east. Hey. We're at the Exploration Society and the filmmakers. Anyway, the slide's appropriate because
Midday.
this is the sunset, and this is me filming the sunset on a point which is quite interesting between Hawaii and Majura in the Marshall Islands, right on top of the international date line. And when I took this photograph, this is the second time around going east, okay? And I recall the first time going around the world when we were going west. Mike and I took off at 2 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, and we flew for 22 hours, and we landed only 2 hours after we'd taken off, at kind of 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon. And then the second time around, on this occasion over here, we took off on a Monday. I don't know if it was a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but essentially it was the equivalent of a Monday midday, flew for 22 hours the other direction and landed on a Wednesday, 46 hours later. I worked out that if we'd taken off just before midnight on Sunday evening and throttled back and flown for 26 hours, that we would have been able to land on Thursday morning, just after midnight. And I then really would have lost a day, kind of thing, in the process. The business continues, and in the context of being an old man and having a business like this, obviously it creates opportunities. Part of my job is to test and experiment with these aeroplanes, and so creates the opportunity for a whole lot of exploration. This was the first tail dragger aeroplane that we ever built, and the benefit of a tail dragger is, you say, it's good for exploration. Basically, you can land short and on crap runways. So if you want a bush plane, this is the kind of machine that you want. This is the first one we ever delivered to America. Beautiful shot overhead Los Angeles Central City. And we took the opportunity, because of all the hard work that we were doing in our business at that time, to go and explore a little bit in Namibia, and you can just land. I think more in Namibia than any other country in the world. You can really explore by aeroplane. More than, correct me if I'm wrong, Lloydie, more than 50% of Namibia is either a reserve, government-owned and not closely controlled, or a tribal trust land, conservancy. And so you can really take off in an aeroplane in Namibia with no idea of exactly where you are going to land, but you know it will not be a runway. You will just find a spot. And this was an absolutely incredible adventure that Mike and I had in our prototype two-seater aeroplane, developed after the four-seater, which we flew the second time around the world. Ended up at an incredible island called Baía dos Tigres, which is off the coast of Angola. It is a World Heritage Site and has no tourism and no people, essentially. Although it looks very cool in a tail dragger aeroplane like this, we actually had our prototype four-seater, which is a nose-wheel aeroplane, along with us the whole time, with our test pilot in it, Sean Russell and Lloyd Ross. And Lloyd made a very, very cool movie, which I don't think we've got time to look at now, but you can find on the internet on Wild Landings. It's called Wild Landings Namibia. We then had to show Oshkosh, because we never made it in our prototype four-seater, our four-seater aeroplane. We flew there up through West Africa and through the Azores and Newfoundland to Oshkosh in 2014, 2015 actually. And Mike flew that four-seater there. I flew it back to South Africa from Oshkosh through Greenland, Iceland, England, and then down through Africa. Amazing adventure. This is the east coast of Greenland, looking up towards the North Pole. Now Sassuaq, one of the southern Greenlandish cities. That's a Sling 4, that aeroplane. And out of that aeroplane, because Rotax developed a new motor, which was 141 horsepower instead of 115 horsepower, we created a new model of four-seater called the Sling 4 TSI. And this is our demo, factory demo Sling 4 TSI aeroplane. Just a much more capable aeroplane. Cruises 25 knots faster, carries a much heavier weight, and for people like us, creates new opportunities for wonderful exploration as a consequence of that. We have, as a business, sold, I think, in the vicinity of 300 either kits or flying aeroplanes of this model of aeroplane over the last 6 years since we went into production. And it represents, for what it's worth, an absolutely perfect marriage of power plant and airframe. Airplanes are very often designed around engines. And this is a very, very modern, Austrian-developed, Rotax-developed, fuel-injected, turbocharged, extremely fuel-efficient, 1,320 cc, 141 horsepower motor. And the market around the world has been absolutely fantastic. So we now have 320 employees in the south of Johannesburg building our two-seater and this four-seater aeroplane, and we are delivering them about 95% around the world, and only 5% here in South Africa now. And our best-selling model actually is this 4-seater aeroplane. I thought it would always be the 2-seater, which feels more accessible price-wise to people. It's probably easier and financially more accessible to build for people around the world. But, and it's that 2-seater's a great airplane to use in a flying school. But actually we're selling quite a number more of these. There are two kinds of pilots in the world. There are those people who want to fly low-wing airplanes, and then there are those people who want to fly high-wing airplanes. And we realized that we just weren't going to change the minds of a whole bunch of kind of high-wing aficionados. So we realized a couple of years back that if we were able to produce exactly this airplane with precisely the same performance in a high-wing version, that there would be a market out there. So we started developing this airplane. It's the same airplane in the sense that it uses the same engine. It's got the same wing profile. It's got the same wing length. The tail section is the same. It's exactly the same from the firewall forward. It uses the same instruments. It's got the same propeller. It just has the wing on top. And our thinking has proven fortuitous and correct, because we've never delivered one of these airplanes yet. But we've taken orders for 140 of them with deposits from around the world. So we're obviously doing something right. They cost about, the low-wing version, 3.2 million rand plus VAT. And this high-wing airplane is about typically 3.5 million rand plus VAT. It's quite different because historically our airplanes are all aluminium structured. They're semi-monocoque aluminium. Here, in order to carry the structure from the load-carrying components, which are the wings, into the part of the airframe where the load is situated in the bottom of the fuselage, in order to carry that load, one would need too much aluminium, too much weight, too much volume, which would impinge on the size of the kind of cockpit. So this is, we built two prototypes of this airplane simultaneously, nose wheel and a tail dragger. And these are the two prototype fuselages, which, if I have a look over here, this photograph was taken on the 9th of November 2021. You can see over there. And I know that the first of these aircraft flew on the 18th of December, just 1 month after this. So some of the structural testing work we were doing. This is the nose wheel version of the airplane, just testing the load carrying capacity. I'm going to whip through some of these slides because there just are too many. So the fuselage here is composite. Initially quite a substantial amount of carbon, now mostly glass, because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's better for lightning. And if it does break, it's slightly more flexible. If it does break, it doesn't form as sharp edges to harm people. Here's the airplane kind of in its final stages. This is the development team that was working on this airplane at the time. And this is some of our staff members immediately following, I think, the very first flight ever, which you can see there took place on the 18th of December. So the timeline is wrong, 2020. that is in fact when the aeroplane first flew. I was going to show you a video, but the sharing is too difficult. Those are photographs of early flights of the high-wing aeroplane. That's the tail dragger version. There the two are together. So this is the aeroplane which we've never delivered one of. We are going into production right now, and which we need to show to the world so that they can see what it is exactly that 135 of them have ordered from us. And the obvious place to do that is in Oshkosh at the big Airshow in Wisconsin. And the obvious way to get an aeroplane there is to fly the bloody thing there. So it was actually ready to fly last year, Oshkosh, and we were revving up and planning to take this development prototype, Zulu Uniform Sierra Hotel Whiskey, stands for Sling High Wing, to Oshkosh, but we were unable to do it at the last minute because of COVID, and in particular because of Omicron, the South African variant of COVID. The rest of the world could travel to Oshkosh, but we couldn't fly from Joburg to Oshkosh because the whole world shut us down. So it was a little bit of actually a blessing in disguise, because I think we weren't really quite ready. And me and Matt Cohen, we're going to do this trip. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about this exploration, this adventure that we've got coming ahead of us, which I'm really supposed to be here to talk about. So the most difficult thing when you do a big challenge like this is getting on with the people that you're doing it with, you know. They always think like it's difficult to fly an airplane around the world. It's quite difficult to climb Mount Everest or conquer a big cliff. Inevitably, my experience is that the most difficult thing is finding the right people to do it with, because it's an experience always that's shared, you know. So this trip I've been doing for 2 years now with Matt Cohen, who discovered that I was delivering this speech 10 minutes before I started tonight. He said, I'm coming. I want to see what you're going to say about me. So I'm going to have to temper it a little bit. So this is Matt. Matt had a motorbike crash in his, I think, early 20s.
18.
He's 18. He's a lot younger than I am, and he broke his neck. And as a consequence, technically, he's a quadriplegic, although I think he's a paraplegic. I don't know the difference. It means he's got a damage to his C6 and 7 vertebrae. And he and I have become very close friends, and we've done a bunch of adventures. This was just one of the kind of flying adventures that we did together at a certain point, often with his boot and various other people. And Matt was keen to learn to fly. And he learned to fly in this little yellow aeroplane, which is known as a Foxbat. It's a Czech-made aeroplane. And we made some modifications to it so that it can be flown hands only, not without the use of your feet as a rudder. This is after your first solo flight, right, Matt? I wasn't actually present on that day. Since becoming my mate, Matt's also learned to paraglide. This is actually him in his chair over here, paragliding at Rustenburg. And a while ago, flight I missed, but he sent me this amazing photograph, paragliding at Bambi. I don't know, it looks like E.T. This is his girlfriend who he persuaded to join him for paragliding as well. What a beautiful. So Matt will be flying with me in a modified Sling High-wing aeroplane to Oshkosh this year. But we are also joined by 2 other Sling High-wings on this trip. The first 2 aeroplanes that we ever deliver actually kits. And one of them is delivered to an American pilot. Her name is Linda Solis. She's 62 years old, flies for JetBlue. She's been looking for, in her retirement, an aeroplane to fly backwards and forwards between her home in Naples and her second home on top of a mountain in a beautiful golf estate in North Carolina, which has one of the most magnificent runways in those beautiful North Carolinian wooded hills, together with her husband. And she used to have a Cessna 210. She wanted a modern aeroplane. So she looked all over the world and she found the Sling High Wing. And she said, that is the aeroplane I want. She was the first person to put down a deposit and make an order out of America, having never met us or seen one. And so she's at the front of the queue, and she is building her Sling High Wing as a kit in terms of the American law with us here in our factory in the south of Johannesburg, and currently nearing completion. This is quite a glamorous photograph of her that I found on the internet just early on this evening. There she is at Oshkosh last year, 2021, presenting to the world her plans to build a Sling 4 and fly it to Oshkosh along with us. So she will be joining Mike Blythe, my business partner, the guy I flew around the world with the first time, in her aeroplane, which will be inspected by an American DAR, Designated Airworthiness Representative. They'll be flying to South Africa on the 23rd of June. It's the 7th today. That's in 16 days, to inspect the aeroplane so that it can be flown. They've got to put 40 hours on between the 24th of June and the 10th of July, when we'll be leaving as a flight of 3 airplanes. This is the 3rd airplane. This is a guy called JP Schuza. He's a Namibian-born social media influencer with a focus on aircraft. So he's a guy who's created a career for himself, basically doing social media about aircraft and flying. Sponsored by Rotax, the guys who make the engines, Garmin, Pilot Shop, and a bunch of others. I suppose this is what a young person today would love to achieve. Huh?
Young people aspire to.
Young people aspire to, because you can spend your entire life exploring, paid for by other people. I think there are a lot of people that do that. These are some shots I took of his Instagram also just earlier on this afternoon. He's done some flying around Namibia in our aeroplanes. He's a very keen skydiver, which I am sort of quite as well. He's a very, very competent pilot, and he is building his Sling High Wing, the second one that we effectively deliver after Linda Solis's, in a hangar that belongs to me at Tedderfield Air Park, at our business, also in the south of Johannesburg. Some years ago, he flew a Cessna 210 around the world, made a film which has subsequently been flighted by Discovery on their channel. Loves to tell stories, very competent pilot, and quite a deep thinker. I think much to match the stress. He's something of a millennial, and it's quite interesting trying to make all these personalities work together. He's done quite a lot of flying in our tail dragger, and told some stories on his channel. He's known as the Candorist, C-A-N-D-U-O-R, Candorist. And this is him 3 weeks ago, landing out in Namibia. Just beautiful shots that he kind of sent home in our prototype tail dragger.
He's flying with him
at the factory. And he is flying with an Australian friend of his, a guy whose name is William, who is a sort of amateur filmmaker, I believe. William has not arrived in South Africa. I think he's arriving the week after next. just as that JP's aeroplane is scheduled to fly, also on the 24th of July. And they will try and put on 40 hours before we leave. JP he's quite an explorer. He's done a lot of traveling in his life. And I discovered that one of the things that he's done in his life when he arrived here in South Africa is he's ridden a bicycle over 73 days from Los Angeles to New York, which he made a little film about as well, a couple of them. You can see them if you look at his website. And of course, as it turns out, we at Sling Aircraft are also producing bicycles. Don't know if you know that Wilbur and Orville Wright, the people who developed the Wright Flyer, the first airplane ever, were bicycle makers. That's what they did. And during lockdown, we were doing quite a bit of cycling on a particular route called the Sling Loop, loop in the south of Johannesburg, which has got some tar, some gravel, some off-road, some proper arguments about the best bicycle for that ride. And we decided the thing to do was to make our own bicycle. So we now produce a very beautiful titanium gravel bike called the Sling Cycles Tagati. That's what it looks like. This is me riding a Tagati down the snow at Afriski last year, testing it out on different surfaces. And as a consequence of this, we decided we had to go and do some exploring on our bicycle. So I'm going to try and show you quickly a little film that Lloydie made. It's a little 6-minute film of a trip that we did over the Heritage Day weekend last year on our bicycles. So let's see if I can get this right. Share screen. Tell you what, let me first open the film. I'm going to start. Getting ready to leave. And turn it down a bit. Okay, I'm going to try and share this quickly. New share. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is the exploration we did on the Heritage Day weekend on our bicycles last year. And the aim is to leave before sunrise. That's some of the stuff which is going in there. It's camping equipment, our food, sleeping gear, cycling gear, 2 bicycles for 3 days for 4,000 kilometers.
Like all this.
There's a lot more coming. An aeroplane is like a tool for living, especially here in Africa where there's lots of space and sunrises like this. It's the most fantastic tool to go and see what the world has to offer. Woo-hoo! I love the start of a new adventure. This is the route. We're going to Kruispoort, Monati, Pilansberg, Ograbi, Sperneekpan, Stellenbosch, Capigalis, Port Elizabeth, Wavecrest, Quasi, Destiny Castle. Anyway, we've got a hell of a long way to go. This is lovely countryside, this in Mpumalanga, eh? You know what Mpumalanga means?
No.
The rising sun. Mpumalanga, the sun rises.
What language is that?
It's in Zulu.
Zulu, huh?
You need to learn to speak Zulu, my man. You're married to a Zulu.
But I know the important stuff.
Looks like an aeroplane. One right down. Okay. It's got to show on the runway. It's cut. Province number 2 out of 9, man. I think we are province number 3, actually. I think we can count Gauteng.
Oh, yeah.
I rode 10 meters this morning.
Yeah, I pushed my bicycle around time.
feels like the end of quite a long day, celebrating Heritage Day. There actually is little greater pleasure, I think, than sitting around a fire. It speaks to some kind of primeval urge, eh? And knowing that tomorrow you're going to fly 6 or 7 hours, ride for at least 2.5. Ranko, what time is it?
6 o'clock, huh?
Starting to run late.
Like usual.
We fly to Vernieuwpan, and my little mission is to make a cup of coffee and then ride 10 kilometers and see if we can do it on a route that doesn't rise or fall 1 single meter, because the water on those plans acts like a spirit level. Let's go. So this is a Garmin Edge 850, and our total ascent in 10 kilometers is 0 meters. Even Branko can ride on a surface like this. Now, the main reason I wear a helmet is not really to protect my head, it's to protect myself from criticism. So here we are,
Southern tip of Africa.
protected by the most southernmost lighthouse in Africa. Tell you what I am worried about is where we're going to sleep tonight. Because I do not think we're going to get to Wave Crest, even in this wind. But if we don't, we'll find somewhere to stop. Branko, 15 minutes out. We're going to go under the
Bridge.
Storms River Bridge, okay?
Okay.
You want me to land and take you out first?
Yeah, you're giving me fright since we started.
Welcome to Malgan, our second last ride. These are, in Afrikaans, the Drakensberg, the Dragon's Mountains, and in Zulu, Ukatamba, the Barrier of Spears. How beautiful is that, Kana? That's it! The last stop! Lot of exploring in 3 days. Eh? Thank you, Lodi. So I was supposed to introduce that little section of the thing by saying that JP Schulze has explained to me, and I don't know if it's true, that Steve Jobs maintains that different animals have different efficiencies in transferring weight across the world. So an antelope, like a springbuck, can move a certain weight, a certain distance quite efficiently. Obviously an albatross extremely efficiently, but a human being on a bicycle is more efficient than any other animal on Earth at moving mass from A to B. So we will be taking, on our trip to America, 2 bicycles, one in JP's plane and mine along Matt's wheelchair here. Not sure it's going to fit in, but we're going to do our best.
You can leave the chair.
We can leave the fucking chair. Okay, hang on a second. Let me just try and find our teams over here. There we go. See screen. See that one.
Whether you help me or not,
Maybe.
it's fair enough.
You share.
Just put your mouth much.
Share. Okay, so
Okay.
you've met the team, everybody there plus Mike Blythe. This is myself, Matt, Linda, and JP giving a little speech to the Experimental Aircraft Association in South Africa. And we've had our, JP's in my hangar, Linda backwards and forwards, because she flies for free because she's an airline captain. This is at Bona Bona Game Farm. JP on the left-hand side over here, Linda at the back, myself, and some of our kind of hangers-on during this building process. So a little bit about, I'm going to try and talk a little bit about this trip that we are doing now. This is the preparation I had to do for tonight, which I had to fit in the last hour today. So this is the route which we intend to take. It goes from Johannesburg to Luanda in Angola, to Accra in Ghana, to Praia in Cabo Verde, and then a long leg from there to Barbados, 2,100 nautical miles, from Barbados to Turks and Caicos Islands, and then to Florida. Across the states is very easy, probably Kentucky, maybe North Carolina. The route is chosen essentially because it is just the quickest, easiest way for us to get from Joburg to Wisconsin. It's the straightest line with more or less correct length legs. I want you to go to Google Earth, quickly show you how some of that planning is done, but obviously it's an incredibly powerful tool for planning a trip like this. And you can literally whip off the planning, in 3/4 of an hour with Google Earth and the internet. I'm not going to do that because of the screen sharing complications. What I did do is I did just do a screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet, which I set up to demonstrate the different legs that we'll be doing. So you can see on the fourth to last column, the distance in nautical miles. Nautical mile is 1 minute of latitude on the equator across the Earth. So there are 360 times 60 of those. It's 1,321 nautical miles from Lansera to Luanda. The longest leg is 2,100 nautical miles. Conservatively, we'll be flying at 130 knots. I hope quite a lot more than that. But 130 knots is about 240 kilometers an hour. Usually in these aeroplanes, we fly at about 260 kilometers an hour. And at that speed, it'll take us 16.2 hours to fly the longest leg from Praia in Cabo Verde to Bridgetown in Barbados. The prevailing wind, I did this on windy. I wanted to quickly show you windy as well. I'm not going to do it, but if I click onto windy right now, this is what you will see at 6,000 feet. And the wind is equally strong at sea level. There's Praia on the eastern side, across to Bridgetown on the western side, 26 knots. If I was to put the cursor on the red there, it would be about 45 knots. This is the trade wind, almost always straight up your ass from Praia to Bridgetown. So it shouldn't take 16 hours. It should take us something between 14 and 16 hours, I think. We've got 360 liters of fuel. The standard 2 times 99, 200 liters in the main tanks in the wings. Additional tanks that we put into all three of these aeroplanes, 20 liters in each wing. That takes it to 240 liters. And then another 120 liters in two 60-liter tanks where the back seats would be underneath the wheelchair and the bicycle. Those aeroplanes burn about 33, we hope 30, but conservatively 33 liters.
Please do not.
Where's my phone? Oh, is this my phone? Yeah. No. Here's my telephone. I was going to try and quickly work it out, but essentially, we've got 17 and a half hours of fuel. Let me have a look over here. I'm just going to check it up. My calculator, clear 360 divided by 33 equals, no.
Change the plans.
Sorry, talking shit. It's not 360, it's 560. There's 560 liters of fuel in total, 120 in each tank. So 560 divided by 33 gives us 17 now, 16.9. So we need to have a tailwind in order to complete that leg.
It's like a 100 pin.
It's more than 485. 485. Yeah, that is at 16 hours at I think 30 liters an hour. The route is chosen primarily for correct leg lengths, viable leg lengths with the fuel that we've got available, but obviously also to some extent for great places to stay. I think Accra and Luanda are not so great, but Praia, Barbados, and particularly Turks and Caicos. These are some shots I took of the internet of Turks and Caicos just before I came here. Wonderful paradise beaches.
We used flying to Barbados in Coconut Airways.
Oh, yes. I'm sure, Lloyd, you can do that for us easily. No, okay, we might have to make a plan. We'll do the first trip around the world. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the kind of parameters. I've just spoken about the fuel. One of the things that's happened as we've done a series of these journeys around the world, I'll end up in the next 5 minutes, is that the aeroplanes have become far better equipped, much improved in terms of technology. So the autopilots are excellent. We know them well. They're extremely reliable. And we, unlike in the early flights, we were really testing a whole lot of the equipment. We're no longer really doing that so much. We can expect the aeroplanes to perform as we intend. It is, in some respects, safer to fly as a flight of 3 aircraft than alone, because it means that if there's a failure, and typically an engine failure, and one of the aircraft is forced to ditch in the ocean, there are 2 aircraft that are still able to communicate and that know the exact position of that aircraft. So that is one of the real benefits. Of course, if you do these things again and again, it becomes more and more probable that some failure will occur in a piston engine with an exhaust pipe that's vibrating and rattling at some stage. So statistically, the prospect of an engine failing in a flight of 3 airplanes is obviously 3 times what it is if you have a single airplane. So there is 3 times the chance on this journey that we will have a catastrophic failure of one kind or another. One of the problems, especially with such new airplanes, of flying such long distances over the ocean where there is absolutely no land in between, Cabo Verde and Barbados, for example, is that if you are 6 hours in and an exhaust pipe rattles loose or cracks and there's 1,000 degrees centigrade hot exhaust gas pumping out of there, which is going to melt a radiator hose or some electrical fitting, there just is nowhere that you can land. You have at least 9 hours, and in fact more, because turning back, you're flying into the wind. So the no-go point is quite early on. So there's a whole bunch of kind of challenges and considerations in a mission like this that are sort of, to some extent, unique. One of the big improvements that we have is in communications. Each of the airplanes will have an IndigoSat satellite tracking device, which is fitted but talks to you via an app on your cell phone. And it means that the world can see on a tracking website at any instant where every single one of those airplanes is, the altitude, its position on Earth, its altitude, the direction of its travel, and the speed of its travel. So the world can be watching us. There will be tracking on this journey if any of you are interested to follow it when the time comes. And we are also able to send a message up to 300 characters to the website from our telephone from any position on Earth. So it makes you very closely in contact. Somebody can watch the weather, see your position on Google Earth or one of a bunch of weather apps like Windy, and say, listen, turn 20 degrees left, because you can obviously receive a message as well. For 120 miles, there's a storm ahead, fly around it. In addition to the IndigoSat tracking devices, which our insurers give us, every one of us will have a Garmin InReach, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have used and know, but it's essentially a satellite tracking device with also a 300 character communication capacity. So if we go in, each one of us will have one of those in a waterproof bag with us. So we should be able to remain in communication, and it transmits your position, we can get rescued. And then we'll have a satellite phone in 2 of the aeroplanes, Iridium, also operated. It's a fixed satellite phone, but operated through a cell telephone app. We are required by law to have an HF, high frequency radio. So we will fit one of those to one of the aeroplanes, but those things are such crap technology that I seriously doubt we'll have any comms. We will pass the legal test by having it, and we'll pass the practical requirement by just phoning with a satellite phone to Dakar Oceanic, and then later on to Florida Oceanic. Say, listen, our HF radio isn't working. This is where we are, you know. That's okay. If you got a direct number, it's literally a telephone. You just call. You can call ATNS, Air Traffic Navigation Services, directly in Florida, for example. And there is a global system which is quite interesting, which works really well to manage the flights of aircraft anywhere in the world, even between warring nations. And the effect of that is that as crew, all 6 of us are crew, in aircraft, we only require 1 visa for America. Everywhere else we go, we are in transit. You take a crew card, take a pilot license, and you just land, and you can spend up to 5 days, and on we go. So there's quite a wonderful global system for that kind of exploration in place. We intend to arrive in Oshkosh It's a 6-day show, Monday to Sunday, on the starting Monday of the show. And one of the kind of features of an air show like Oshkosh is that it has become over the years more and more around technology, expensive civil aeroplanes, high performance military aeroplanes. But Oshkosh is actually organized by the Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA, of America. And I think there's a feeling going on that there is less and less, there's more and more technology, more and more money, and there's like less and less kind of human spirit. And so when we arrived at Oshkosh in 2009, we were welcomed, with open arms, brought in past the most modern military airplanes and parked next to Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic space mothership. And which was great, it's great marketing for us and so on. This is the South African welcome that we received just as we arrived. And I've got it on good authority that if we all make it to Oshkosh, we will plan to arrive Monday during the main air show. Apparently, the critical time to arrive is just after the American anthem is sung and played. They have military jets and so on, and every attendant at the show is required to stand with his hand on his heart and listen to the Star-Spangled Banner. And we will arrive immediately as that ends. The three little aeroplanes, which is brilliant marketing for us. And we'll then spend 5 days with these three aeroplanes, which we'll be showing to the world. That's our trip. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah. So I think just when James came in, I said 4 years ago, I had the privilege of listening to his talk on the Namibia trip.
Yes.
I think there was a video you said. We'll post
There's an absolutely wonderful film, which is called Wild Landings Namibia.
We'll post it on WhatsApp group.
Posted, yeah.
If you guys want to get onto WhatsApp group, let us know. Any one of the committee guys will add you on. We'll post it tomorrow. Okay, we'll also I'll put it onto our Facebook group.
And you've all seen the Top Gun video, I presume?
Yeah, we have. We'll post it again. I thought it was fantastic. Okay, guys, any questions? How are we doing with time?
25 past.
Okay, we're a little bit late. Can we just keep questions tight? Anybody here? Mariam.
Sorry, load shedding. How does your factory manage it, and does it affect your production plans?
Just before you answer, if you can just repeat.
Yes. So the question is, how does our factory cope with the load shedding in South Africa? And we have struggled like hell. It's taken us some years to kind of get to grips with it, and eventually we just have a diesel generator. But we struggle with load shedding. We struggle with our regulator. We struggle with a bunch of South Africa specific issues. You're an economic journalist, aren't you? A news journalist. Okay. So, despite the fact that you can see our business has been successful, it is working. We've trained most of our 325 employees in-house. A lot of them live, without electricity or running water. But we've been successful. And the good news is I've been to China and I've had a look. I've been to America, I've been to Europe. The best place to start a little aviation business like ours at the kind of bottom end of the pile in the world is South Africa. So we're not about to move.
Anybody else? Michelle?
Don't have a tailwind.
Yes. Then we'll sit on the beach and drink beer. If we don't have a tailwind, what will we do? We'll sit and drink beer, and we've been looking at this every day. And it's slightly worrying because we need to keep moving to arrive at Oshkosh in time for the show. We've got desperate time constraints. The fuselage of even our flying prototype is the fuselage off. We're actually replacing it because it's not quite right. So none of the 3 airplanes are flying at the moment. There are these kind of 8 and 10 day periods where the weather does quite weird things and we can be unlucky with that. By and large, the trade winds are pretty damn reliable, and they're going to become more reliable as the northern summer moves on.
I think the trick here is I'm not going to sit with you when we check. Sit together with the headwind.
I know. What our plan is to fly to Luanda. It's about an 8.5 hour, 9 hour flight. Sleep the night, take off the next morning and fly to Accra. I think we'll be exhausted because it's about 11 hours. I think we'll be quite exhausted. I'll spend one day in Accra. But the very next day we'll fly to Cabo Verde. And we've got 2 full days in Cape Verde, 2 full days in Barbados, 2 full days in Turks and Caicos planned. If, the weather reports are so effective now, you can see what's happening 5-6 days ahead. If it's good and it's going to be bad in 3 days, we'll go. And that's part of the kind of technological change. Feels easier. Yeah, Matt is spends a lot of his time tugging around.
Okay. Guys, any last questions here?
The back there? No, at the back, yeah.
You answer this one. I just want to see if there's 1 or 2 online. Just
Yeah.
James.
You go.
You live
Yes.
client.
Yeah.
Yourself out.
Can you imagine what he must show and doesn't show?
I mean,
Yeah. So I hope that the thing can help me. The question is, I was talking a bit about the developments of technology and how it kind of lowers the hurdles. It makes this kind of stuff easier. And the question is, how does our flight compare, for example, to Charles Lindbergh's flight in the Spirit of St. Louis in 1929, the first transatlantic flight from the east coast of America to a field in France, a bog in France kind of thing, I think. So I happen to have read quite a lot about this and recently some other literature about similar kinds of projects. And it's just inconceivable to me, the skills that those people must have had in order to do flights like that. I don't recall how long his flight took, but I think something like something between 28 and 36 hours, maybe 32 hours. And in that aeroplane, because of the setup of so much fuel, he was unable to see out the front. It was a tail dragger. He had to use a periscope to look forward.
Wow.
He obviously had no autopilot. He was unable to sleep. And to stay awake, there was no weather reporting. It was navigation by dead reckoning with a compass. Historically with a sextant, but he just worked out his latitude through time and speed. But there's wind corrections, and he's got to fly through the night. Very, very, very difficult, unbelievably brave. Charles Lindbergh's flying around America for a period of 1 year, delivering speeches afterwards in the Spirit of St. Louis, actually demonstrated almost more how unbelievably incredible his flying skills were. It was just beyond my reckoning. I think it's a little bit like rock climbing with a power drill nowadays. The kind of, the hurdles are lowered, but things can still go wrong. There is no longer any navigation. There's so many GPSs in the aeroplane. There's 1 per watch, 1 per phone, 3 epheses. You can just take off and go, If you didn't need permissions nowadays, that in principle could get an aeroplane, take off tomorrow morning and fly around the world. It's become a very, very small world in